Community Forum is sponsored by the Easton Grange 196 and a friend of Yardley Wood Rink and the Easton Lions Club.
There's a storm across the valley, the clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. I'm Priscilla. I'm Gustolson, your host, and today is part 3 of the extraordinary life of and times of Avery Lee Williams. And to talk about Avery's early childhood and many of the episodic events that really have his trademark on it, we welcome today his son, Kevin Williams. Kevin, thank you for joining me.
Yes.
And for part 3 of the extraordinary life and times of Avery Lee Williams. So your dad was such a wonderful human being, a philanthropist, and really a crazy guy too, because he took risks from the time he was a little boy to his last few years. He was always out there searching for ways in which he could help the community of Easton. So tell us a little bit how it all started.
Yes. He would be self-described as a crazy person because, he would say, you can't take yourself too seriously, Kev. We're all just passing through, and we better have as good a time as possible while we do it, but also help fellow mankind out. Mm-hmm. And so those were words he kind of lived by. But as you know, Priscilla, I believe you were a Northeastern gal, and he was a Southeastern boy, which was down at Five Corners. And it was quite a difference between Northeastern and Southeastern. Folks still talk about it today. I don't quite get it. But Southeastern was, of course, very rural and agricultural. And Northeastern was, of course, the industrial center of the town and kind of the region, in a sense. I mean, it was going and booming. So there was Lee, born in 1935 down there in Five Corners on Foundry Street, not far from the Shaw's Plaza. Actually, his family land, they bought part of that property to put in the Shaw's, his mom's property. So he was born down there, and of course it was in the Depression, 1935, so it was a difficult time. And he was the first child of Avery Williams Sr. and Margaret Adams Williams. And, he came out of the womb a live wire. I hate to say it, and he would say it. Dad would tell me as ADD became more and more pronounced in the 90s and the 2000s, you started to hear about it more and more in the phrase, and of course now it's out there all the time. But he would say to me, I would definitely be diagnosed with AD&D as a kid if I were around now. But back then, I was just a ball of lightning. I just couldn't sit still. And so I know that caused a lot of problems for his parents. But, what did you do back then? You just dealt with it.
Yeah.
So he was always getting into mischief, and he couldn't settle down. So that being said, I have a little piece here that shows that Lee was bitten probably when he was 3 or 4 years old by a snake. He was into everything, as I mentioned, and it made the local news in like 1940, and of course they watched his progress to make sure he didn't die. They didn't know what kind of snake it was. They got the rough length of it and all that, 18 inches long, but he was in the backyard on Foundry Street out there roaming around and came across it, and of course he couldn't leave it be. Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But when I would talk to Dad about these things and the ADD topic, he would say, I almost died. 4 times before the age of 6. And I said, oh no, what happened? Well, there was the snake bite. Yeah, okay, we got that documented. He said, and then, you know, I almost fell off the roof of the house as an infant. I for whatever reason, the window was open in the summertime, and I got out on the porch roof, and fortunately my mom came in and saw me out there, and she panicked, and I was on the edge, looking over the edge, about to fall over as a toddler. And she said, Lee, come on over here. Would you like a cookie? And I climbed back away from the edge and came back to the house. So there we go with the ADD and the bright, shiny objects always being attracted.
Yeah.
You know, another instance that he mentioned was he was roaming around the yard on Foundry Street, and the cesspool cover was not completely sealed. And it was kind of wobbly because in the old days, everyone had a cesspool and it would get pumped. And the cesspool man would come in and lift the top off, pull it out. I think some folks still do that to this day, maybe not so much. But it hadn't set properly. And he walked on one corner of it and he fell down into the cesspool.
No.
Fortunately, the lid went part way, and so it didn't fall back and close on him again. But there he was down in the cesspool, screaming blue bloody murder, and his mother heard him and came down and fished him out of the partially opened lid. And boy, she must have had a heart attack on that one.
And she must have had a hard time fishing him out because, it's
and of course the
it's
cleanup.
a good 6 feet.
It is.
Before you see the water in a cesspool, I know, because I have one.
Oh, you do?
I still do, yes.
Right. So yeah, they were very common.
Yeah.
So there was that. Another time that he almost died was he was get into everything, and he told me that they used to heat the house with kerosene. And of course, this is way before my time, and he said that there was a large glass jug, maybe 5 gallons or 10 gallons or what it was. Every family had one, and it had a faucet at the bottom. And of course, curiously, put his mouth underneath it and turned it on and drank the kerosene.
No.
Just, I don't know why, just because it was there, and he was young. And of course, he had a rough night with that one. I don't know if he needed his stomach pumped. I don't think they did that back then. I think they just observed you to make sure you made it through. But he would talk about the smell that the kerosene is very difficult to get out of anything, especially clothing. And so I'm sure he wore that for a couple of days. But he would always mention that when he would be down at the Five Corners School, which is my understanding is the water department is there now.
Uh-huh.
Yep. You can help me with some of these because I'm a little unclear. I know what's there now, but not then. But everyone had that smell because it was very common to heat with kerosene.
Yeah.
But that was another time that he almost bought the farm just because he couldn't sit still.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, but how old was he when that happened?
Oh, under the age of 6.
Under the age of 6. Wow. Well, he was destined to be a risk taker, wasn't he? I mean, he jumped at opportunities. Try them out. See if it works.
Yes.
See,
And
he was not he didn't say, well, this is exactly what I want to do. He says, I'm not so sure. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. So he was willing to fan out into different areas. And so he went through high school. Do you have any stories from high school?
he was, you hit the nail right on the head. He was destined for risk. And we're going to come back to that because there's some stories there. Especially, young men starting out at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, they do have a propensity to gamble, whether it's cards, whether it's anything, and it holds true now. I mean, look at, you can gamble on the football games on your phone. Young men love to play poker. We found that with the Easton Lions Club when we ran a poker tournament, and all these kids from Stonehill College, all these boys from Stonehill College showed up and wanted to win the championship of the town. That was quite an eye-opener. And they still go. They love to do it to this day. But to get back to just to wrap up on the ADD. So Dad would admit to having ADD and admit to the problems he gave his parents, but he would say, you know, ADD kids can get a lot done. It's not that bad a thing. I mean, it can be tough on the parents, but he said, I would hire a person with ADD in a minute because I know how to handle them. You have to stay on them constantly. They generally are not lazy. They generally are go, go, go. And if they're focused, they will if you can stay on them and focus a person with attention deficit disorder, they will outwork a regular person, hands down.
Right.
1, 2, 3 times to 1. But you have to stay on them and manage them properly and know what you're dealing with. Coming out of the Depression, his folks, he ended up having a couple more siblings. He had Bud Williams, Francis Williams, that was known as Bud, was 2 years behind Lee. And then 2 years behind that was Claire Williams, Sister Claire. And then he had Dottie Williams, who was 2 years behind Claire. And so it was really tough with his folks that were trying to raise a family down there when they worked, Avery Sr. worked on the duck farm. And they would literally try to make money any way they could. And they taught that with their children to hustle, hustle, hustle. And so that they used to sell puppies on the front lawn on Foundry Street. So as people would ride down Route 106, a kid would look out the window, oh, look, they got puppies for sale. Dad, can we get one? And so Lee and Bud, because they were the oldest, would be tasked with selling the dogs on the front lawn of Foundry Street. And they were in little cages and pens. And his dad taught him to work on commission. So if there was a mangy mongrel, kind of just not that good looking, that they were trying to sell, that would have the highest commission in the sale. And if they had a Cocker Spaniel that was just absolutely beautiful, there wasn't a lot of commission in that. So of course, he would tell me, people would pull into the yard with kids and they'd get out of the car, and of course the kids would go over to the Cocker Spaniel, and because they're beautiful and just want to hold them, and there would be Lee and Bud pulling the mangiest, ugliest puppy that they could find out of the other pen and putting it into the child's hands and saying, but don't you like this one? Don't you love this one? Because they knew that one was paying the highest commission.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they were trying to move those puppies on to better homes and families. So all of them got into that. And I'm sure Claire and Dottie could tell some stories as to when they would do that too. Yeah. But that was my grandmother's job, was raising dogs. They had some kennels in the backyard. And so they raised dogs while Avery Lee Sr. went to the duck farm, the Hacko Orchards Duck Farm.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and which was a tough business. It was down in Norton, which is now Blueview Nurseries. So if you're driving by Blueview Nurseries, you can look in the back and you can still see that they have buildings for the ducks. They're still using them. And so as Lee got older, he would help his dad on the duck farm, slaughtering ducks, which was a very tough business. And when he was 12, 13, 14, and he also had a paper route down in Five Corners.
Your dad told me about the ducks.
Yes.
And how he had to slaughter them.
Yes.
I think they chopped the heads off, right?
Yes, or they would use a very thin knife and go in through the mouth and hit the jugular that way. That was another way to do it. Yeah.
Yep. Wow. And he was only 12.
Yeah, and there was quite a process to it, as you know. It's a dirty job, as Mike Rowe would say, and so they have to be feathered, dunked in the hot water, and the feathers have to come off after they've been killed and, of course, gutted, and then so that's quite a process.
I know, because my dad had always had 100 chickens, and I think they were capons. And so I remember being 10, and my job, after my grandfather came and So my dad would hit him with a club. My grandfather would chop the head off and then dunk it in the hot water. And my job was to pull the feathers off and then take the chicken into my mother in the kitchen, and she would clean it off, take everything out. And before you know it, it was in the freezer. I can't believe I did that. I couldn't do that now, but at 10 years old, I guess,
You do what you have to do.
I could, yeah.
Yep.
So
Those were the times, and just to dovetail on that, when Lee was the 4-H club leader, he would try to instill those lessons on everyone that was in the Easton 4-H Organic Garden Club, and we had the mini farm, and of course we'd have our meetings, and he was the leader, and we'd had a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, all that stuff, and we learned Robert's rules. We learned the hierarchy of an organization as kids that were 8 to 12 years old.
oh my goodness.
It was excellent,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
and he knew he was teaching us all that. And we would go into the backyard, and once a year, it was time for the capons.
No.
And okay, tonight's demonstration is how to clean and gut a chicken, so that in case anything ever happens, you'll at least know how to do it if you ever have to do it. And of course, the kids that chop off the head, the chicken would be bouncing around, and the kids would be all in a lather, and boy, it was quite an experience.
Yeah, of course. And you remember it, don't you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. You were part of the club.
Part of the club, and everyone had a job, and everyone had to do part of the processing.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it was plucking the feathers. Come on, guys, these chickens are hung up. Pull those feathers off.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, reach your hand in there and pull out the gizzard. It's got to come out. If someone's going to eat that chicken, it's got to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, let's continue on a little
Yes.
bit, because we're halfway through the show. So how did he get to go? He was, I remember this story. His father said when he was 12, his father told him he had to get a job to buy his own clothes because he wasn't going to get any more clothes from Mama and Papa. So, but then how did he get to go to Bridgewater State?
Yeah, well, he was a saver, and he had that paper route, and so it went way up Bay Road, way up Pequannock Ave, up Bay Road. It was quite, I don't know how many miles it was, but it was significant, and he did it on his bicycle, so he saved a lot of money. And so he got pretty good marks in high school, and decent marks, but of course didn't have any funding, and he had parents that had never gone on to further education. So his dad, he had to pay board when he started making money, a reasonable amount, and his dad actually said to him, "Never mind that college. Look at me. I'm making plenty of money. I've always got money in my pocket, and you don't need to do that. As a matter of fact, if you go on to Bridgewater State College, your board's going to go up." And which was kind of reverse as to how things go nowadays.
Yes.
So there was a penalty to going on and going on to school, and but he said, "But I think I want to do this." And so he did go to Bridgewater State, and he was in training to be a school teacher. It was a teacher's college at the time.
That's right.
Yep. And so he did his training in Mansfield, his student teaching in Mansfield. However, he would say to me, "Boy, I don't know how I'm eternally grateful to those folks over at Bridgewater that passed me through. I don't know how I made it my senior year, because I was working, and then I would go out and I would play at night, and I would deal cards, and that's another story we can talk about. And I was so bleary-eyed when I would get into the commuter room at Stonehill and at Bridgewater, excuse me, and of course I would start running the the poker game, and I would rake the pot. And I would bring snacks and treats, and us guys, young men like to play cards
Right.
at the college age. And we would have, before school would start, we would have a poker game going, and we'd get that pot up, and I would be the dealer, and I was running that at the same time. And I'm just so eternally grateful that they passed me through, because I don't know how my marks were that last year. Yep.
Because he was busy with poker.
He was busy with poker, yes.
And then after he graduated, there was a significant event that occurred.
Well, before that, in the summer times, he would work at the casino in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. He got to cooking as he became 17, 18 years old, 19 years old. He would work at Sylvia Sweet's Tea Room in Brockton, and he was a cook there. He was also a cook at the Howard Johnson's in Easton.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the Howard Johnson's?
Oh, sure do.
It was down where Edmonds was, now Porticello's.
Yes.
Is my understanding.
Yeah.
There was a Howard Johnson's there, and a lot of people probably don't know that, younger people.
Yeah.
And they would get a lot of traffic from the dog track, right? Because 106 and 138 with the Raynham dog track in the 50s, 40s, 50s, a lot of traffic would go by there. And so Lee and his brother Bud and many people in Easton used to work at the Howard Johnson's as a short order cook. And so it was hot dogs and hamburgers. Do you recall what they served there?
Oh, I just remember the ice cream.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, Howard Johnson ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah, and French fries and hamburgers and that kind of thing.
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So one of the stories he told me about Howard Johnson's and my cousin Bob Tufts, who was a little bit younger than Bud and Lee, he just passed not long ago, but he used to work up there too, and they had a rule up there that there was no eating the food unless you paid for it. However, if someone happened to make a mistake and it was ordered incorrectly, then that was fair game. And so when Lee and Bud would be working up there, occasionally, I don't know how often it happened, and Bob Tufts remembers this would happen on his watch too, years later, someone would say, ordering, one mistake, and 2 hot dogs and beans, and so that's how they kind of got around that rule.
Yeah.
And of course they were young guys, so they could really eat.
Yeah.
But
so they had more than one mistake.
yes, that would happen on occasion. Yeah. But also after that, once Lee got his chops there, he started working at Sylvia Sweet's Tea Room, and they had a bit more diverse menu, and he would work as a short order cook there, and he really learned how to be quite a great cook. And he then, after his stint at Sylvia Sweet's Tea Room, he then moved on up to the casino at Hampton Beach. And he remembered all their recipes, their clam chowder, their lobster bisque, their lobster thermidor. And so he would work at quite a few restaurants around. He worked at Merrimack.
Oh, really?
Yes, for Red McAfee.
For Red McAfee. And
yes.
Was he in college at the time?
He was in college at the time, and he was a good employee because he was going all the time and he wasn't lazy. And Red McAfee knew how to. A kitchen is a great spot because you don't get a chance. If you've got ADD, you don't have a chance to look out the window and pause. Because stuff is always coming in. What's next? What's next? What's next? Boom, 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 boom.
Right.
And so it kind of was a natural for him.
So then what happened after college?
Well, he did do a stint when he was working at Sylvia Sweet's Tea Room, which was owned by Greek folks. And he became very friendly with the Greek community. And of course, Lee was a linguist. And he loved to learn languages. And he would take a shot at learning, just to communicate with someone, learning the top 20 words, top 20 phrases of whatever language it was. But in order to talk to some of the other cooks at Sylvia Sweet's Tea Room, he really had to dig in and he had to learn the language. And that came back to him later on in the investment business and paid off in spades because there were many, many Greek folks that loved to do investing. And so he would speak to them fluently in their native language.
Wow.
And he was a natural. As a matter of fact, they actually gave him a Greek name. He was adopted by the Greek community. So Avery Lee Williams became Leonidas Vasiliopoulos.
No.
Leonidas was from the 300 Spartans.
Right.
He was the hero, but that was the closest to Lee
No kidding.
that they had.
Wow.
And Vasiliopoulos was Williams. William, Vasilius, Williams,
Right.
plural.
Right.
So he had a Greek name ultimately, and he was very loved by the Greek community.
But then there's a story about how did he get on the New York Stock Exchange floor?
Well, we're going to get to that. We mentioned that Lee had a propensity to gamble. And after hours at the Sylvia Suites tea room, his Greek friends would say, "Hey, Lee, there's a floating crap game, and there's a poker game, and baccarat, and everything else going on in the city of Brockton." Now, this was 1950, 51, 52. He was class of, 52, 53, 54, 55. Rocky Marciano was huge in the city of Brockton. So there was a local bookie in Brockton that would run a floating crap game. And you could also place bets on the fights. Can you imagine the action that came in from the city of Brockton with Rocky Marciano? If you think the Patriots are big, imagine the city of Brockton wanting to bet on Rocky, their favorite son. And so it was a very big deal. So at night, after he would close up at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock down on Main Street in Brockton, and they would go to the Greek club, and they would gamble there. Now, it wasn't long before Lee would talk to Brockton Eddie, was the name of the bookie. Brockton Eddie Massad, he was a Lebanese fellow. It's all noted in the Rocky Marciano book, and that's another story. And so they got to talking, and one night Brockton Eddie said, "Geez, I'm down. Lee, you ever run a crap game?" He says, "I've done poker. I did the pot at Bridgewater State all the time for the commuters, but I'll take a shot at it." And say, "Okay, get in the pit." And so there's Lee with the stick, right? And I can just envision it. Full head of black hair, 20, 21, 22 years old. And he's the stick man at the crap game. Now, there's usually 2 or 3 guys that will work a crap game. As you know, if you've been to a casino, you see them in there. But you have to be able to count odds very quickly. And depending on how the roll comes out, sometimes it pays 2 to 1. That's easy to pay off.
Right.
2 to 1. Okay, easy. Sometimes it's 3 to 2. A little more difficult. Sometimes it's 4 to 5. It can be difficult. And you have to do it quickly. So when people would put $10 on a certain number, and if it hit or not, he would have to do the payouts, and you have to keep it moving. And so he became a stick man at the floating crap game in Brockton for a couple of years, and the money was excellent.
And that quick calculations that he had to make served him very well later on the stock exchange.
Exactly. That the ability to think on his feet quickly and do that quick math, along with his it needed something to stimulate his mind all the time. He loved it.
Yeah.
It was a natural. But there's more to this story, and we should probably pick it up later on Brockton Eddie and the disorganized crime in Brockton at the time.
Right. Okay. So we have about a minute left, but I think we're going to do part 4.
Yeah. I think we probably ought to.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you, Kev, for coming today, and I look forward to part 4 on the extraordinary life and times of Avery Lee Williams, your beloved father.
Yes.
Thank
yes,
you.
He was. Quite a guy.
Hope you've enjoyed viewing this segment, and please look forward to part 4. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, be well.
Community Forum is sponsored by the Easton Grange 196 and a friend of Yardley Wood Rink and the Easton Lions Club.